Let's go to round 4, I believe.
Right. Well, I'm gonna read a surfing poem because I surf despite the cold waters of the Atlantic. Even in February, I'm out there now. My son's going out there with me too in the cold, 35-degree water. But so this is
Wow.
try to capture a little bit of surfing, but I take the title from is coming from Moby Dick actually. And the chapter Castaway, when Pip falls in the water, this little deckhand, and he's out in the water and he loses his mind sort of because he's in the vast unknowing abyss aloneness of everything, and he sees inside himself in the universe, and it says he saw God's foot upon the treadle of the world, like he saw God in some way in it, and then in the water. But when he's back on land, his crewmates think now he's an idiot and a fool, like I think he's lost his mind. But in the water, he's complete. He knows it, but like he can speak, the language of God, but that is not the language of men. So I was like,
Wow.
Connection of the water. I just like, plus Al, your poem, I think one of the last poems you're going to read is reminded me of Moby Dick and Ahab. There's a character that reminds me of people remind me of that story.
Oh, you mean Fingal?
Yeah, I mean Ahab. You reminds me the opposite of it. But so this poem's called About the Idiot. I just sort of lean right into the poem from the title. About the Deccan idiot, but bivouacked in a sea, set upon an egg surfboard, its single fin just right for carving the shoulder-high lefts, he wades the is of was and will be. Summer slips the moon its light. August old lobster boats putter across an eastern scrim of night that is blue stone dissolving in old bone Atlantic. To eyes bent west, the sun sets fat in the dunes, cottages and marshes, tossing its billion embers into foam. He bobs hip deep between this fire, that gloam. Waves like wine glasses, mouth wishes, and, burnished in the sunset, score a pink so sore distinct from the night behind. Waiting for a set, he stares into eternity's roll inside these fragile hollows, and then a billow peaks. He turns, paddles languidly from the scree of white waters, roiling gravity, until board and he gut the earth, both yanked into a pull of birth. Everything is easy as if falling down a dream. He pops up, clumsy feet gripping the wax. The sandbar bores its curl into the brine. He tucks into flickers of time, dry ticks in the barrel. And then the eye upon the babble winks. The green room closes the door, the ceiling sinks. He cannot crouch out, arms fail and back bends. He flails, stumbles again. Any world watching watches him thrown into spit of rose and milk. For all his struggle to stand against the fall, or fall again to stand, for all the universe there he scans, he goes about the deck an idiot. But bivouacked in the sea, paddling back into the deep's horizon, he wades the is of was and will be.
Wow. Bravo. What music. That's the one I was talking about. You got so many of those interior, and it's not just the rhymes. It's you use all the musical devices over and over and over and over again. And the way that you repurpose words within the phrases is terrific. I mean, the sandbar bores its curl into the brine. Actually, that makes sense to me. If I think about it, I see that but it sounds incomprehensible without being incomprehensible. And that's great because it's so musical that you get, so now you've got mystery, but you've got it aligned with clarity. So there's some other great uses of words here. I mean, to crouch out, he cannot crouch out. Well, you know what that means, but I've never heard those two words put next to each other before. A spit of rose and milk. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't want to just babble, but this is just so strong.
It's beautiful, yeah. Summer slips, the moon is light. That's like, did I catch that right? With the
yeah. What did he say? Yeah.
Summer slips, the moon is light. Right? Is that
He
the line?
bobs hip deep between this fire, that gloam. You got it right, Brian. Yeah. So
It's
that gloam,
Yeah, yeah.
this fire, that gloam. Well, gloam is short for gloaming, meaning gathering dusk, right?
Yeah.
But I've never heard gloam. I've never heard gloam alone.
I think I did look
It's
it up.
always-
It is, there is.
Well,
the
it's what-
gloaming, but, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's gloaming, but it's one of those things that, again, it's self-referential. You don't have to explain it to use it because we know what it means. So, I mean, wow. Yeah. Was this a lot of, if you can characterize the process, was this a lot of incremental layering or was it a spontaneous burst?
I think, it starts off spontaneous where I'm just playing with sounds and trying to and I was really just trying to paint what I remembered from like being out in the water and the sunset. And it's, one part of the world is over there is getting dark. Over here, it's all roses and, and milk in the water. And to look at the water as the sun's setting behind and I was just trying to, how do I paint that with words and I'm like probably overdo it and just get a little luscious with it. I'm like, that's what it felt like. It was just like, it was gushing with all these images. And it just felt perfectly, I just felt perfectly balanced on the board, in the water, in the littoral zone, between the earth and the sea. And I was just like, I'm like, I'm not going to, you're in some ways, I was seeing what Pip saw, like God's foot upon the treadle of the loom. And just sort of like this, it all lines up for, Frost's idea that poetry is a momentary stay against confusion. I'm like, everything lined up for a moment. Just like in sports, you're in the zone. Like he's watched like Kobe and he just draining threes. You're like, he's in it. He's in the zone. He's feeling it to get down.
Well, but there are a lot of ways to try to describe that state. And this is just a really personally unique exercise of technique because I've never really, I mean, it's very dense. There's a lot happening. It doesn't flag at all. It doesn't slacken. The freshness of the language does not slacken from the beginning all the way through to the end. That's what makes it, for me, a really impressive accomplishment because you set a very high bar for yourself, right upon the beginning, above the Dakin idiot, but bivouacked in a sea. I mean, from the very set upon an egg, I don't know what an egg surfboard is, but I feel like I know what it is. What is it?
It's just a shape of a type of board. It's a little rounder, a little more, flowier, it's not like a long board, which, the old style, but I still use, but, or like a hot doggy, little short board. It just has this sort of like, I don't know, even like a classic 70s feel where everything's just smooth and carving and not
right.
Trying to fight.
So this is, to me, this is exact illustration, meaning no disrespect to the explanation you just gave, of what Frost was talking about when somebody asked him about a poem and he says, "You mean you want me to say it again in worser language?" It's like all the things that you just said about what an egg surfboard is, I already knew just from egg surfboard, even though I've never heard it before and don't know what it is. It's all, it spools out of the language, out of the imagery in a way that is like unerring. It is not confusing. It's to me, it's the opposite of confusing. Because I hate things that are vague and imprecise for some lame reason. Like I was trying to describe something that was imprecise, so my language can be loose. No, you're doing something, you're describing something that's discrete, but you're doing it in a way that something that you experience is not like any other experience, and you do it in a way that's not like any other writing. So, yeah. Has this been published? Is it in any of your books?
Yeah, it's in The Wounded for the Water. So it's like 10 years ago now. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 6 years ago. And I'm trying to remember when I wrote it, probably a little old before that. Because if I was almost feeling like, well, I haven't said this poem out loud in many, many years. I'm like, I don't even know where this is going. I hope this works.
Well, thanks for reading
Like
it.
a subset question, but like, have you heard from like surfing community folks? Has there been any connection that way on the poem?
I've, a couple times I've read it to people I knew who surfed out there, or like, they're like, oh yeah, like, no, not a, I should just send it to Surfer's Journal or something, and just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
there's a poem. What'd you guys put? Just because
Yeah.
I think I thought of that before. Like maybe a surfing audience would appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, like I know,
Wow.
like I've been reading mainly baseball poems today, but like there used to be a journal called Elysian Fields Quarterly,
Oh
and
yeah.
that one went under. But now there's Sport Literate. It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
That's
my friend just got something picked up there. Sport literate, yeah.
yeah,
So,
and that's wide ranging. So something like that there too is, yeah. So for people who are watching this conversation, if they're writing poems like that too, there's some places to outlets to put their work out.
That's a nice tip. Thank you. Yeah, I'd never heard of Sport Literate. That's good to know.
Yeah, they're cool. They got a lot of good stuff there.
Wow. Well, I could continue to say things about this poem that I love, but we'd be here all day. So let's move on. I really dig that poem, Matt. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, you get to follow.
Okay, where are we at? Yeah,
You're
which is
up.
impossible again. But
Hit number 4.
number 4, okay. Yeah, well, I was hoping to have something that might riff off of that, but maybe we'll find something in there that does. I bet you. Almost every poem finds a way. This is called The Drive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and this it's a very prosaic thing to say as a preamble to it, I suppose. But like, I drove I flew to New York, and I drove out to do a reading out in Scranton, and I normally would just like take a train or maybe rent a car or maybe another flight. I don't know, find a way to get there. But for some reason, it worked out where there was like a black car service where they drove me, and the guy I started talking with the guy who does this drive. That's a common drive for him, New York to Scranton, but I was an unusual person for him he normally drives ball players back and forth. And so this poem comes
from the minors.
Yeah, and well, majors, minors, and vice versa. And it's like the Yankees, so it's this comes from that conversation with him, and it's called The Drive. It's about a 2.5-hour drive in either direction, give or take a few. But any driver will tell you it's a nonstop conversation on the way up to the show, and 130 miles of dead air when you're headed back down to Scranton, to that AAA field in Moosic, Pennsylvania, where ball players burn through their per diem at the Longhorn Steakhouse, eating alone sometimes, heads leaning over a porterhouse as they chew and ponder their on-base percentage, the cost of a new set of cleats, the season slipping away, which credit card to put the hotel room on. And how could it be any other way? To watch a dream turn blue in the rearview mirror as the sun turns to rust in the windshield. Is it so different for any one of us? The way we sometimes know so clearly that we're driving away from everything we hold most dear, the hard work, the tears, all that we'd imagined and then realized, if only for a brief sliver of time, all of it gone. The infielders at the edge of the grass, smell of pine tar, the heft of the bat, with vision required to see a thing through, the ball in flight, the outfielders wheeling back, just a stadium in a city on a day that once was, the past frozen in the air, and that sound of the crowd rising to its feet, once so electric, fading by increments, subsumed by the silence of trees, that endless sway of pines along the roadway, how they blur in green applause.
Great last image.
Yeah. Dreams turn blue.
That's a sure bummer of a poem. Sorry, guys, but
Yeah, but it feels like it's perfect, like sort of like, is this summer's ending? The boys of summer packing it in, and the game's ending. The game that seems to go on forever will not go on forever. It's the guys, just the image of those guys over at the Longhorns by themselves chewing their steaks. His dreams turn blue, and the rust sun turns to rust. I'm like, oh gosh.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing.
Steak, I was hesitant to do the steak thing, but I was thinking like, I don't know, remind me a little bit of Hemingway and the Boxers, you know?
Yeah.
How he always had to get that one. If he could just get one steak, he could make it through that fight and he'd get the good payday, you know, kind of thing. And so there's a little Hemingway tucked in there. So it's, you know, or a try, you know.
Well, you know, the bit about you say so much with each line, it's like which credit card to put it on. When I see that, I'm immediately reminded of the enormous disparity between what minor league ball players, even at AAA, make per diem. And then if you make it to the show, even briefly, because the union is so good, you know, it's like $500,000 or so. I mean, it's an enormous,
Yeah.
you know,
they've done
the
some good things the last
disparity
couple
is,
of years, but man, yeah, for sure.
yeah, it's just enormous. And so that's kind of how they justify the struggle in the minors, that they don't have to pay those guys because everybody will stick with it for the chance for the big, you know, for the big payday. And this is,
Isn't that America?
you know,
yeah.
yeah,
Overspending, waiting on that big payday. We're just going to keep hanging on to our dreams and spending you. And which credit card do I put this thing on? But one day we're going to make it.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I said sports is like this, a trial run, you know, for life itself. But in this kind of situation, it actually is life itself. You know, you take us off the field into the lives of minor leaguers. I suppose it would be interesting getting a similar poem about like basketball players in the G League or you know, they're making the drive down from Maine. You know, and they do that all the time now. You know, you bring a guy down, he's not going to see the floor, but you want him to be there, and he'll bring him down for 3 games and then send him back to Maine to get some, you know, some game reps, and you're doing this continual yo-yoing. It's all built in for the basketball players; they can't avoid it. The other thing fascinating to me about the minors is that you've got the combination of the people that are young trying to make it and older players trying to hang on, and then rehabbing players, you know, that are just breezing through on their way back to $30 million a year.
Yeah, I remember
You know.
I wanted to about one guy. I remember in Fresno when I was in an apartment when I was going to school and working jobs and all that. There was a pool there. I remember going to the pool and there was a guy out there drinking beer and he's like, hey, he wants a beer, and he gave me a beer. And so we're sitting there talking and shooting stuff. And he told me that, you know, asking kind of like his life story or whatever. I didn't ask him that, but, you know, he started going into it. And basically he had, you know, when he finished high school, it was this thing of like, he could go to college, and he was a pitcher, and either go to college or he'd been drafted and offered 50 grand. Right. And so he took the 50 grand and went and spent some of the money, like when he first got it, you know, as in that first year, as he's starting to try out and all that, and try it out and learn the ropes or whatever. Then he blew his arm out, you know, and he never pitched again. He never pitched a game, I think, even in the minors. It was like spring training or whatever it was before they even got into and so he had that initial money, but that money doesn't last, not, you know, and then the school was gone, you know, so he's out there with like Stoner Brian, like, you know, you know, so it's hard.
And that was the good part of his day.
But like, you know,
you are the good part.
It's hard when you have a dream that I think is very time dependent, you know?
Yeah.
Like to be a writer, to have a dream as a writer, to like maybe publish a book or something, you know, you see folks who are like in their 80s or 90s and they'll have their first book published. Like you can't do that in baseball or boxing, or, you know what I mean? Like certain, it's a very time dependent thing. It's a short window, you know?
Season.
Yeah.
I've told this story on other poems on shows, but I'll tell it again. When Frost published In the Clearing, he was 86. I was 15. And I got that book, and you know, I thought I was going to be a physicist when I was that age, but I was interested, you know, I was a reader, and I love poetry, and I love Frost. And so I read that book and I thought, Man, the guy's 86. He's still doing it. I want to do something with my life that I can still be doing and maybe even still getting better at for as long as possible. And that was not going to be playing center field for anybody. So, but I mean, that's the thing about sports as a trial for life. It's scaled down. The stakes are higher. It's make it or break it. And your entire life as an athlete can be over at 40 or 30 or 20.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I guess the love
if you get hurt.
The love of the game or the sport, whatever it might be, we have to find a way to come to terms with that, and then find a way, how do we still have a love of the sport and be involved somehow, you know? And maybe it's yeah.
And then there's a lot of people that move into a different aspect of the sport. It's like, I was reading a thing about Joe Mazzulla when he was playing at West Virginia. And he's playing at West Virginia, and Jerry West came up to him and read him the riot act. He said, you got to give more. You weren't hustling enough. You got to maximize your talent. He's going, Jesus Christ, Jerry West is telling me this. I better pay attention. And so he didn't make it as a player, but look where he is now. It's like there's a lot of people that move sideways, into different aspects of sports. So, yeah. So there can be life after your athletic career, certainly, but if you have an athletic career, you know that it's going to end sooner, hopefully, unless you're Roberto Clemente. It's going to end sooner than your actual end. So, yeah, that's why people have such a hard time when their careers are over sometimes, because that was life to them and they don't know what else to do.
It becomes your identity too. Like, okay, what am I if I'm not? It's like,
yes,
I've lost.
Yeah, exactly.
A person.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that get unmoored as a result of that. That's the question that a lot of extreme achievers, professional achievers, face when they finally retire. Like surgeons, and I'm used to saving lives. Now who am I?
Yeah.
So yeah, luckily, we can keep scribbling as long as our minds permit. So, okay, so let me go to my penultimate. This is not long. It's a little life lesson in the form of a metaphor, turning fate into a pitcher. It's called The Problem with Knowing. Because there's a problem with knowing. I mean, when you don't know, you think, oh, if I only knew. But then when you know, it's not always enough. Sometimes it's not even much. But anyway, the problem with knowing. If fate's a lanky southpaw looking in and picking up a sign from God knows where, with just a pitch to get me out, then I assumed I had to learn to steal the signs so I could know what's coming. By the time I had that figured out, it took till now, most of my life, I learned another thing. It doesn't help that much to know what fate is throwing. Sure, he's got hellacious stuff, but just a journeyman's control. He can't be sure the pitch is going where he wants. Low and away can still end up a loud and angry buzzer in my ear. So now, I don't anticipate. I just react. Which is hard to do.
Yeah.
Man.
Oh yeah. We turn ourselves around trying to figure out what we're supposed to do or what's going to come and how we plan for what's going to come, and you drive yourself nuts doing that. Like, you just got to live in that. I think in your last poem, it's the in-betweenness, living in those doubts. If you can find a way to do that.
Yeah, you got to live with uncertainty, and that's why I wanted to use this particular metaphor, because I think everybody understands what it's like when a pitcher's got unbelievable stuff but is wild. It's you can never be comfortable. That was like the stories that they used to tell about Ryan Doran, who's before your time, both of you guys, but he was a hard throwing guy. He was on the Yankees, I believe, Brian, at one point, who had Coke bottle eyeglasses. And he used to go out with a mound with these eyeglasses and, you know, and throw his warm-ups and then take them off before he started pitching. Everybody went up there like, what the hell is going to happen now? So
You might.
I should have used Ryan Doran in this poem. It would have given it more specificity, but you get the idea.
You mind saying the first two lines again?
Yeah. Well, I got to complete it because it's in the middle of a sentence, but it fates a lanky southpaw looking in and picking up a sign from God knows where, but just a pitch to get me out. And I assumed I had to learn to steal the signs so I could know what was coming. You know, like if you know what's coming, then you got it made. No.
Oh, yeah. But I like it. What I like too is the from God knows where, because sometimes we have these serious poems, but the balance between humor and, you know, like it starts off with a bit of humor, and and that's sliding from humor into the philosophic, you know, is oftentimes, I don't know, I feel more comfortable with that in a poem, you know?
Yeah, that's why I use words like hellacious and a buzzer, you know, in your ear, because or like a journeyman, because normally you don't hear journeyman and talk about fate and life and death in the same sentence, because a journeyman's just a journeyman. But yeah, thanks. I mean, it's a little humor is almost always a good idea.
I love the fates of lanky southpaw. Like just such a hard thing to hit. You know,
it's gonna be a southpaw, right?
It's gotta be. It's like, oh man,
you know, which by the way, just to go back, Brian, to your poem about Mays and Chapman. So the reason that they started putting new balls in play immediately whenever a ball got scuffed was so the hitter could see it better, right?
Yeah, but because it became abundantly clear when that happened, he got hit and he was killed. You know, he died the next day. They didn't do it immediately, but there was I think it took like 3 or 4 years or something, but then it was instituted where, you know, they did, but it was also to clean up the game, because it was part of the process trying to clean up the game, not just the ball, but like the movement of the ball and control it a little bit more. So it gets to like the buzzing in the ear and like having a little more, you know, control and stuff. So because before, sometimes the ball, like that guy, Submariner, you know, Mays, like he was known for having a ball you could barely even see because it's just dirt, and you know, you'd get it so dark and dirty before you know. But now they do a thing. There's a Lena Blackburn rubbing mud. Do you know about that?
I know they rub up ball, every major league ball, with a special mud, but that's for grip, but it doesn't make the ball look brown.
No, but they use that to help for the, you know, because pitchers would still say, well, I can't just use a plain ball. It still needs to be roughed up a bit, you know.
Yeah, it's too slick, right?
What is that balance? But there's a family, been a family business going through. There's one place, there's a secret hole on some river where that family goes down, and now the daughter is taking over the business, and she goes down each year and with wading boots and like a shovel and gets that mud from the river, and that mud is what they use to rub the balls with, and they put them in machines now, but they still use that because it has a kind of grit to it enough that does the you know, the perfect amount of grit or whatever handling them. And
that's, I think, great.
Down in Central America somewhere, there some of them are down there, but it's still the rubbing mud is used for that, you know, from my understanding. Oh no, I get that wrong. The mud is from there, but the stitching and stuff I think is done in a couple of certain places. So it's interesting about the, you know, the tools of the trade, like boxing gloves. I've never researched that, but I'd love to find out, like, how do they make them a certain consistency, so you know if you have you know, like what is the material made out of and what's inside the pads, you know, and I know that's really well thought out, but I haven't done that kind of research. In each sport, like if you
Yeah.
take objects that people are using, there's a whole history that usually starts, you find histories of certain people and it just becomes fascinating super quick, right? You know, it's a rabbit hole and a rabbit hole and a rabbit hole, you know?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
It reminds me of we started thinking about, you know, the deflated Tom Brady's deflated football
Yeah.
thing. And then
Yeah.
January O'Neill has a great poem called Tom Brady's Balls. It just like leans into that, but also the
Yeah.
double meaning there.
Yeah. She's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So what did I just go last?
Yeah, I think that was your
All right, so we're going into last round.
last round.
Lead
All right.
lead on, young man.
A little bit of a longer piece. It's kind of it's a bit of a ballad, because I was writing, you know, ballads are often for local heroes or stories of local, you know. So this is a ballad for my grandfather, who played for the Green Bay Packers and became this, you know, he's a legend in the town, a Hall of Fame high school, you know, National Hall of Fame high school football coach, also all pro for the Packers. He was all Hall of Fame at Fordham. He played for Curly Lambeau, and, you know, my whole life is hearing stories about him. I never really knew him that well. He died when I was about 4 of cancer. But that shadow, you know, that local, you know, and not just family members, but there's, you know, I think every town has their, you know, community might have these legends, these heroes who rise up and then, like all things, fade away at some point. I just thought I'd write a little poem about that, about my grandfather Ray Riddick. And sort of, and the poem isn't about him. It sort of veers away from him because it's about legends. Kind of make a reference to you guys know that poem, Who Shot Liberty Valance? You know,
Oh yeah.
that old Western, when people believe the myth, print the myth.
Mhm.
So I kind of reference that in that.
Yep.
But this poem's called Legend, and I got a little quote here from Lou Reed from his song Coney Island of the Mind. You know, man, when I was a young man in high school, you believe it or not, that I wanted to play football for the coach. They always call my grandfather the coach, like a lot of coaches get called. So, legend. Recall the frayed red corduroy robe and him, my grandfather, in wide-armed wooden chair in Lowell, the kitchen where my mother grew up, the Highlands, Wilder Street, round us. Now he's laughing, watching me dance for him, a foot shod in black leather, tapping out a memory, or just some story given to me by my mother. My uncle said Gramp called me Zonka because my thick toddler thighs were like that dolphin's back. And Gramp was sick by then, so all I knew of him was a robe below a nose broken 7 times between high school and Green Bay. On my wall, a photo of him in his Packers gear, sitting with Curly Lambeau, posing as if to recapture something that was candid a second ago. Before the war, 2 daughters, before he quit the NFL to coach, to become coach, before state champs, coaching his son, before working Sundays at the florist, before telling my father no, before the cancer and the July day at a rented house in Seabrook when he said, "Take care of my wife," to my dad just days before he died. And this was a life spun out from frames of photos and friendly anecdotes, like him playing semi-pro games under a pseudonym to send money home during the Depression while on a full ride of Fordham, or sitting on the can at Lambeau's locker room. He heard his coach come in and say, "We need to sign this Riddick kid," and held out till they paid him $500 more a year. Or that meet in high school when he figured the angle of descent from the hole in the wall, how far he'd thrown the shot. And all this gets spun through jennies of local history, myths carried out by sons, carried into legends looming around us, measuring us against our most impossible ghosts. I can't even recall his voice. Uncle Ray, who must have sounded like him, is gone now too. And the way the men in my family die young in beige cold rooms of antiseptic light warps like whispers woven through a sick-lipped joke. And these deaths dissolve our boyhood, weigh us down as men, as much of that as we can bend to and still not break. So as men we learn to doubt the folklore trill of our fathers' lives, that no spotlight fixed on them as either hero or villain, that neither they nor we stand protagonists in this play. For there were mothers and aunts, cousins too, drifting through, all slipping off stage to die in a letter, becoming, oh no, did you hear who just passed? At some Sunday brunch with your disinterested kids. On the wall of the high school field house, his name, Raymond E. Riddick, remains. I recall the dedication, the building as new and Graham alive, my mom so proud, the town honoring their sinewy legend, and I was only 7 then. But I recall 10 years later, Chris Lyman laughing, must suck to have that kind of pressure. The fucking gym named after him? Like you even had a choice about being any good? Growled in his voice. I don't know how I felt that weight, but loved that he, the best athlete in school, empathized, saw me, even if just more headlines to be whittled away by sports page stats that don't ever know the story between trick play and punt. And where slipped coach from all this? Ephemeral in my life as in these lines, the man loses out to the myth each time I try to conjure something truer than some story of him with Jack Kerouac or pissing next to John Wayne, the Duke, truer than the hurt of his daughter still missing their dad, truer than the stiff-hipped old men who stopped me, yet less each year, to say they loved him, how he made them men. So whatever else he may have been, this seems to be where it wants to end, where rough-hewn nuances of life fade. I guess it's best to just print the legend. They'll build a new high school. That field house bulldozed along with his name. We who are left will forget, and thus we are what is forgot. Highlight reels lost to dust. All of us. Thanks for listening.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah.
My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings.
Look how my works.
I'm not. I'm saying this like totally true. Like the poem is beautiful as it is, but if you kept going on for like a book length and just made a book length poem of that, I'd be all in the whole time. You know what I mean? It's just like I like being in the space of that poem. You know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
okay.
it's simultaneously personal and universal. You know, and it's so personal.
And a couple of
And
times,
you know, you had go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, a couple of times you
No,
sort of
you.
accelerate the music with before. You do that beat phrase, you know, then after, and just sort of before, and then a little later you do it. What is it? Truer than. You know, there's a truer than, but it's shorter. You don't do it as many. I was like I was going to do a similar riff, but he just did a couple, and then you say ramped it up a bit, and then went in the thing. Just nice touches stuff. I like when there's parallel structure like that. So if there's a longer poem and you have something where it ramps up a bit and it speeds up, to have another version of that later, you know, or whatever it might be. Just so it's not something happens and you would never see that thing happen, that technique or whatever happen again, you know.
Yeah, yeah. It's a form of unification.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, I mean, you're liking it as a technique. I see it in musical terms. It's very much like musical structures, and well, maybe you're seeing it that way too, Brian, and just you didn't say it that way, but yeah, there are a lot of techniques that you use, Matt, that remind me of different aspects of music. In this case, it's the structural aspect, and then the rhythmic aspect is there, and then also in that other poem, the melodic aspect of it. You've got a really strong rhythmic sense that is, I think that it carries you in such a way that you don't, that I don't miss a really strict rhythmic underpinning, a strict metric underpinning. And the way I kind of think of it is that, because, you know, I'm always writing really very against a strict meter. And I think about it like, we never ask, say, classical composers, you know, Chopin wrote sonatas and the form is, you know, existed before him, but he also wrote fantasias and he created a bunch of forms. And nobody says that the the works that don't follow a traditional form aren't Chopin, or that the ones that follow the traditional form are different from the ones that don't. They're all Chopin. So the fact is you're following an internal set of disciplines that come through. You know what I'm saying?
Using the ballad form and then, you know, softening it, you know, so it's not so strict, but there is the, you know, lines 1 and 3, you know, there's a rhyming going on with lines, you know, what is it like, you know, sort of 2 and 4, then there's a 4, 3.
Yeah,
4.
there's a lot of slant rhyming between 2 and 4. That's true.
A lot of you know, a lot of beats.
But it kind of underscores my point that you can either approach forms, you can be a strict constructionist or a loose constructionist, and Frost said that too. And so I don't make any distinction between the two in terms of quality. The fact that I prefer one to another is completely beside the point. You're a great example that you can have a looser constructionist approach if you do all the other things that you do. You know what I mean? In other words, it's not just a kind of a relaxed version of a strict form, because you're juicing everything up with the language and with the details. And you know what I'm saying? You're using all the other arrows in the quiver. So there's nothing undernourished about it from a kind of a traditional standpoint, not for me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. This is a little odd, but I sometimes think of it like, you know, when you're flying a plane over like the middle of the country, say Nebraska or Iowa, and you look out and you look down, it's all these giant rectangles, you know?
Yeah.
And they're like, if they kind of look like an Alexandrin or like a sonnet maybe or whatever, you know what I mean? You got so many syllables and you got to stop. And then, you know, going back to the Greeks with the idea of, you know, the verse and the strophe, you know, the stickic, you know, the stickic integrity of the line. The idea is it's a very organic metaphor. The farmer has to put the plow into the earth and then create a furrow or a line, and there's such a strict space or a formal structure of those fields that they have out there, because there's a goddamn road right there. You got to stop. Yeah, that's how it's a sonnet, and that's how it's made. You know what I mean? But you fly over, like, you know, like where you guys, both of you live, and you fly over some of that landscape or other side of the country, parts of Oregon, and you look down in the arable land, the land that you could use for actual farming, where you could have a poem. It's some weird thing that looks like the state of Idaho or something, you know, like I can make that land work for me. You know what I mean? It's like it, and then this poem reminds me of a melding of the two together, you know, of those two approaches, you know. But this idea of like free verse, I think if we as poets could talk about in free verse and take the organic metaphor to its fullest extent, then those who don't write poetry or are interested in it, they might understand free verse as not being chopped up prose, but very intentional. Yeah. And taking tools from different things, turning the quiver of all these different tools we have throughout the centuries to apply to the thing. This one thing I know I'm making, and I have to learn the poem as I'm making it. You know what I mean? Sorry to talk so long.
That's what it.
I'm really fascinated.
That's what it should be. Yeah, that's what it should be. That's what it should be. But there's so many people that are just don't hold themselves to very high standards.
Yeah,
and they can get away. You know, they can get away with it.
Yeah, but there's others too that are sort of like, you know, God damn it, Bob Dylan plays an acoustic guitar and he doesn't plug that thing in. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Well, exactly.
Yeah. This is formalist, you know. So yeah. But it's a beautiful poem, man. It's a beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm a big fan of The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, the movie, and that is the quote. You know, this is the West, Senator. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend. and you know, where you came from, the legend was fact.
Yeah. Who knows what's.
You can't get away from it.
Nope.
Yeah. You must think sometime, because you were only 4 when your grandfather passed, that just a little bit more time would have given you such a deeper experience of him, right?
Yeah, I talked to my kind of couple, my twin cousins. They're about 7 years older than me, and they have a real deep memory of him and doing stuff with them. And it's they have a totally different experience with them. And they,
Sure.
my dad's the story. He tells my mom he proposed. Well, he went to like, I want to marry your daughter, and my grandfather said no. I'm not impressed. And my dad's like, and my dad wasn't from that town. He's like, well, I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to impress your daughter. And like, so he was, would stand up with him, but like they found a respect for each other, but because nobody said no to the coach, and he's like, that's not my plan, sir. I'm not listening.
That's a good story. Wow.
They found respect with each other, illegally breaking up a boiler in a basement, and getting rid of it in the middle of the night.
What was illegal about it?
They weren't really, I don't think you're really supposed to like dismantle equipment like that and throw it out in a junkyard, like without getting special permits or something.
Really?
But the night
wow.
This boiler, my grandfather didn't think that my dad would hang with him, and he hung all night. And they just like, all right, good work.
Wow, that's
great.
That's a poem your dad could have written.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's good. I'm glad you read it. The length, I'm with Brian. The length was an asset, not a deficiency. Wow. Well, what's your last one going to be, Brian?
I think it's going to be an elegy for. I got to go Yankees on this one, so it's gonna be an elegy for Thurman Munson. But everybody likes Thurman Munson. That guy was a working class dude, man. You know what I mean? So. I hope so. I hope everybody likes Thurman Munson, but it's called Touch and Go Landings, an elegy for Thurman Munson. What are we to do when the news comes? The paper describing the Cessna, the airport on approach, that blue and cloudy light at the end of summer. What are we to do when those we love die young, die short of the runway, the engine stalling, fire engulfing the cockpit? In Munson's last at-bat the night before in Chicago, the count run full. The pitcher, lefty, leans into the windup and the ball, spinning, keeps spinning, suspended now for as long as the imagination allows, so that everything remains possible. It's true. In the air between the mound and home plate, the ball is spinning, even now, and it could be a strikeout or a home run, all of this and more, as time itself holds its breath, leaning in, witness to the wild unfolding secrets of history, the way it is for us all. A Tuesday morning, a Thursday afternoon, our bodies radiant with the light we carry, with all that we have learned. And death itself a surprise sometimes, landing hard too soon, the way it is when those we love most crash into that last moment, that last breath, that last glimpse of all that is or ever will be. But imagine if we could hold them in that space there between the mound and home plate, the way Munson flies over the curvature of the earth, nose up, climbing 15,000 feet and leveling out, the plane becoming his body given wings.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. I love that turn where it goes the way it is for all of us. It just turns it and just makes it big. It actually makes me think of the conversation with my poem too, like just sort of like the bigger picture turn into like that was beautiful.
I appreciate it. It's one of the, it's hard to like writing about that because sentimentality comes in so quickly and it's so hard to not feel kind of, but in the ending I also thought, like at the time I was hoping this might be part of this book that I put out, and I was probably thinking a little too much about it being in the world, like if someone read it, because I was thinking about and this is when you write about real people, like we've been doing, like if, what if the Munson family read this, or somebody who loved Munson, they're still alive right now, so
sure.
Like I wrote a poem about a guy in my platoon who committed suicide, and I don't know if that's ever come to light in that family, you know what I mean? And so
wow.
Yeah. And so at the end I wanted something that was true to the poem, but I still wanted, like, if they read it, something that they could be like, yeah, he is, not that his death was beautiful, but that his life was, that he was alive in his life, you know? I don't know, it's hard writing about death, you know? I say this as my dog is banging on the door over here. She doesn't bark, but she's very insistent that she goes outside right now, so.
Well, we'll bear with you.
Yeah.
Well, you know, ending with an exercise in the imagination insulates you from any kind of sentimentality, you know, because we're there. You're inviting us to imagine this thing, and so we're not dwelling on what happened to him, because we're in the act of imagining him alive at the end. So you're taking advantage of the complicity of the audience to protect them from kind of a downer of an ending. Yeah, it's interesting to compare this with the Clemente one. I mean, when you sent these, I thought, geez, 2 poems about guys that die in plane crash, you know, ball players that die in plane crashes.
Yeah, true.
What are the chances? I mean, how much further could you take this? But this is very different. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's the poem. It's not a sentimentality, but a sincerity. You know, honest. I think there's I've been hearing, and I got a lot of young students and like this want to get away from irony and skepticism and just have sincerity and just, you know, and honest emotional truth is, I think, really being more valued and necessary. So we're just like, yeah, but you always got to be that place where like, oh, am I getting sentimental? Like, oh man, you know what? This is how I feel. This is how I feel.
Yeah.
It's good to hear you say that, because I've been in the opinion that sincerity and honesty have been taking a beating in the wider culture for a number of years now.
Yeah.
So people coming up, I mean, I know where you are and who you're working with. That's good to hear, because they'll be, you know, those people will be running things when I'll be gone, but you'll be old. So
Just hope they don't get too worn down and beat up and then become sarcastic and ironic, and you know, got to keep protect those dream spaces.
Well, it's also interesting to me because, you know, I went to Andover, and that was our life, was sarcasm and irony. It was relentless. And that's only one of the reasons why I value the opposites as much as I do, because they're in short supply. And I don't think you can have too much honesty or sincerity, really. For that matter, Brian, you touched on shame at the end of that earlier poem, and that's an emotion that hasn't been getting a whole lot of exercise in the culture recently, and maybe it should get a little more play than it's getting.
Yeah, I was trying to think, you know, fear was something I wanted to like explore, and shame. And shame, I know I'm intrigued because like Tim O'Brien talks about it very eloquently in his work, and like a lot of reasons why people go to combat. You know, he's talking about the Vietnam era, but a lot of it had to do with shame, why they wouldn't refuse, or you know, not a lot. Well, I didn't read Tim O'Brien about it, but he's very eloquent. But shame intrigues me, like how it's one of the drivers in the engines of culture, or like how we interact with each other and stuff. And you know, it's how we're, the carefulness of like way people are, and it's you know, it's also a part of the culture that doesn't allow for mistakes from each other as much. So if you make a mistake, it's similar to, you know, Matt, where you're talking about you don't want to be remembered for one thing, you want to be remembered, you know, for other things, to be a wider version of itself, you know. And like shame is, I think, connected to that too, because, you know, like if you fuck up on something, man, that could drag you down and be just an albatross you can never unload yourself of, you know. And so it crimps people's possibility of what they might try to do. Just the fear of shame.
That O'Brien. Well, I think that O'Brien line was like, in war, men kill each other because they're ashamed not to, or they're afraid not to, because they don't want to look like they're cowards. And we have this whole culture of like, that's what I think toughness is not showing your your emotion or you're showing your heart,
Yeah.
which is hard to do, which should be considered tougher to do, should be considered strength, but we carry it as like a weakness in most too many places.
Yeah.
Well,
for
it
me-
is ironic that some of these issues are flying around the poems that we've been reading, because we've had poems about bullies and violence against bullies, and about penitence. Your poem, Matt, about asking to be punished in court.
Yeah.
Because penitence and shame are not the same.
Mm.
I just think that these are really important human emotions and states of awareness and consciousness that are either not well enough understood or are deliberately misunderstood or slighted. Because shame is something, just to go back to what you were just saying, Brian, that can cut both ways. If you don't feel shame when you should, or if you feel it when you shouldn't. And I don't know where we go in the absence of the moral leadership of organized religion that's being more and more questioned and abandoned nowadays. But maybe it's worth considering that the poets of the culture have a right to deal with these issues and maybe provide some kind of comfort and some kind of guidance. And that's something that I value in the poems that you guys have read today, because I think it's something that poets maybe aren't being looked to provide, but we certainly have the ability and the responsibility to feel like we should do it. If that makes sense to you, I don't know. At least we explore these issues.
Yeah.
I always go back to a little bit because I teach a class in it, but Moby Dick and Toni Morrison talking about Ahab as the epitome and the victim of a toxic masculinity, because he has to know if the whale is somehow God or just a random act. He has to know if there's meaning in his life or not. He can't not know. Like, he has to know the answer, let it down, and it kills everybody because he can't put his pride down, his anger down, his toxicity down. And whereas the narrator Ishmael can just wonder about things each chapter and then move on and not know the answer, and just can kind of like drift around. Oh, I didn't get the answer to that. Let's move on to the next thing. But like Ahab's like not he doesn't need to know. And I think that's just like what I was thinking about in your last poem. It's like, it's okay. You don't have to know. You can live there. And if you can live there, and it's it's a good place. So your last poem was on my mind when I was thinking
Wow. Well, it's funny. I mean, you're giving me a perfect segue between what you just said, Matt, and what Brian said in his last poem when he was talking about, you're in this state where, might have been the poem before the last poem, where you're in this state where it could be either this or it could be that, right? Remind me what I'm talking about, Brian?
Well, this one does that too, but yeah, I know your concept, what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's either you won or you lost. Which is it?
Yeah.
That's the segue for my. This is a long poem, but it had to be long in order to get through all of the twists and turns, given the setup. But if you know baseball and you love baseball and the rules of baseball, it's a framework for this little philosophical exercise. It's called Fingal's Folly. And it goes back to, playing as an adult with adults, in a league or in something where there's not anything really at stake. You're playing. Our last at bats, down 2-1 at home under the city playground lights, the last game of the season, two teams finishing out of the playoffs. Meaningless, you'll say. In the big picture, I'd agree. But I got up with 2 away and looped a fly ball into right. It fell in front of the right fielder. First he overran it. Then he kicked it, picked it up, threw it in the stands, and I wound up on third. Then Fingal came up. He was 2 for 3 already on the night. He worked the count to 3 and 2 and fouled a couple off. Now, in that league, the rule was if you foul a third ball off, you're out. It's kind of a pain, but it sped up the games. On the next pitch, Fingal stepped into one and stroked a drive, a deep shot I watched rise over my head right down the left field line. It had the distance, but it was slipping toward the pole. I turned to see if it stayed fair. And all at once, the field went dark. The banks of lights went out together with a thump, like someone pulled a switch. At first, I was so stunned I froze 3 feet off third, expecting that the lights might come right back on. Just as suddenly, we stood, each one alone in the pitch black. Nobody spoke as seconds ticked away. But nothing happened next. Eventually, the players started talking, calling out to one another. It was clear the game was over. There was no continuing. But had we won or lost? My car was parked behind the screen, first base side, so I just went down the line towards home, feeling my way. I think I stepped on home plate in the dark. I know I felt a hole that righty hitters dug with their cleats deep in the batter's box. It made me take my next step awkwardly. That's when I would have touched the plate. You feel its rubber surface then, you don't sink in. I didn't think much of it at the time. I mentioned it because of what came next. The players found their keys against the fence next to the benches, and they beeped their cars and started them and put their headlights on. In the flat glare of high beams, we lit up the parking lot and bunched to talk it over. The umpires did their best. No one had seen the ball go foul or said that it stayed fair. It disappeared too soon for anyone to say for certain one way or the other. So we had either lost or we had won. Last game of the season anyway. There wouldn't be a date to make it up since neither team was going anywhere. So in the end, they pinned us with the loss. We'd paid the umpires. There was beer to drink. Fingal half tried to argue, but no one could make the case that he had hit it fair. We simply couldn't know. So he gave up and drank his Strohs in silence. Then both teams began to pack up, and he looked at me like he was cooking up some kind of plan. He was a thinker, Fingal. Loved to play, but he'd say things sometimes nobody got. We'd look at him. He didn't seem to mind. The players said goodbyes, and one by one the cars pulled out, their high beams overlapping, crisscrossing through the dark, then single file, snake-like, up to the main road. Fingal watched them go and turned to me. His voice was quiet, though by that time we were alone. He said, "One thing I want to know. After the lights went out, what did you do?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, did you go home?" "I went that way. I couldn't see. But did you cross the plate?" "I think I did. I felt it on my cleats, I think. I can't be sure. Why do you ask?" "Because you had to score ahead of me. That's figuring the ball I hit stayed fair. You had to score and tie the game. Do me a favor, pull your car around and shine your headlights on the field." While I did, he went back through the gate and walked the bases. He took his time and touched the places where we put the bags, and then he stepped on home deliberately, but casually as well. A tall, stooped figure in a uniform, a brilliant stick lit up against the dark, insects around him, swimming in the beams. Then he came back out to the parking lot and walked up to my window. "Thanks," he said. It would have bothered me not doing that. "I still don't get it, though," I said. "We don't know if the ball was fair or foul. We can't. If I don't touch the bases, then it's not a homer anyway, no matter what we know. Those are the rules. At least this way, it's possible we really won." He seemed contented saying that. "But that makes us the only ones who know it, and it's still just in our minds." He shook his head at that. "Fair and foul are only in our minds. Somebody thought them up. Ball's just an object on a journey through the dark. But no one else is going to know. We will. That's all I want. We know we did the work it took to make the unknown possible." I didn't see what he was getting at, but it's not just unknown. It can't be known. He looked at me as though I were a kid who needed further patient explanation. Call it a thought experiment. It's like Schrodinger's cat, except the box stays shut. In this case, either outcome can be real. They stay that way because we'll never know. What isn't knowable deserves a chance, at least, to stay a possibility. But doesn't the uncertainty of it still bother you? This time he laughed. Hell no. I live for the uncertainty. What's known is dead and buried. Where's the fun in that? Well, I thought you wanted to be sure we won. Well, we win or lose, it's okay. But I'd rather not be sure. I love the possible. It makes me feel alive. That's why I play. And then he turned and headed for his car. The French say everyone has got his reasons. Fingals belonged to him and no one else. I couldn't see the game his way, but I'll say this. He never minded extra innings, and he was always happier than me.
I love it. Woo!
So could you, I've never read that to anyone. It's in one of my books, but nobody's ever commented on it. It was never published except in the book. So, but you can follow it, right?
Oh my God. Yeah. It's a perfect story.
Way through.
What's known as dead and buried is such a great moment. Where's the fun in that? I love it. Yes. That's everything. Possibility.
Yeah, and that line.
Yeah.
All is just an object on a journey through the dark. You know, it's like we're all like that. We're on a planet that's just an object on a journey through the dark. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. But I mean, I wanted to get, it's not just about being a stickler for the rules. It's more than that. And I wanted that to come through.
Yeah.
Because he actually doesn't even, go ahead. Sorry.
No, is that it's in its poetry, it's that in music, it's the play between the rules and breaking the rules, or like, you know, getting around the rules, and like, how do you move inside? We were sort of talking about his technique. You know, you have to finish, you have to go around so I can go around. Those are the rules. But
yeah.
There's also this magic that we're creating because the game didn't really end. It's great. You know, it's playing jazz, you know.
And
well, good, because that's what I am. That's what I play is jazz.
The ball's sort of suspended up there forever, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, to me, that's like Thurman Munson, you know, at 15,000 feet.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting because I was thinking while you're reading the poem, I forget which ball game it was, but I think it was like around 1912, or it must have been after that actually. But early in the game, there was a
Homer and the Glowman.
It was
Homer and the Glowman,
and the airplane came through.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it caught it. They say, you know, when last seen, it was in fair territory and leaving the park. So,
oh, that's a different. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted you. That's a different story. Yeah. The homer and the Glowing was one thing, but then there was a home run that was hit out of a ballpark into the flatbed of a train car.
Yeah.
So the story was, it was the only ball ever hit that went 26 miles before it came to a stop.
Yeah, no, this one was there was a plane, there was a low flying plane, and there was a pop-up of the infield, and it lodged into the plane, and so they were like, well,
really?
What is that? You know, so they said when last seen it was in fair territory, leaving the ballpark. So it was a home run.
So how was it ruled?
It was ruled a home run. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. All right. So I'm going to tell this story, even though we've been gone a long time. This has been a super conversation. I couldn't be more grateful to you guys. But I hit a ball once in a softball game in a field whose left field line was a road. And so people that came to watch the game, it was late in the game, and I came up and we had two guys on, and they had a ground rule that if you hit a ball that landed on the road, it was a ground rule double. But if it traveled beyond, over the road, it was a home run. So I came up and I hit a ball that, as it was coming as I was hitting it, there was somebody in a car just beginning to drive down the left field line. And it was in the summertime, and the driver's side window of that car was open. You can guess where this is going. The ball went on an arc and it disappeared. It went through the open window and fell in the shotgun seat of the driver's car, but he kept going.
That's a home run. Yeah.
They ruled it a ground rule double, and I was so pissed off.
Never
I said,
touched
how cheap is that? When are you ever going to see that again? The ball's still traveling, and you're giving me a double. So, but that was another, that was in a league game, and everybody was completely dumbfounded because there was no way you could have drawn that one up. But it happened.
That, by the way,
Well-
that name Fingal is a perfect name for that
Yeah.
character. I know it's a real name, but it's also a perfect name, Fingal.
Well, good. Thank you.
Never
Yeah, it takes a specialized audience to appreciate that poem, I think. Because you really have to, you got to know the rules, and I don't know. But I wrote it. I didn't worry about who would get it when I wrote it. I just wrote it, Because who knows if anybody's ever going to get anything. So, well, you guys are terrific. Gonna pull things to a close. Thank you profusely for your participation. Great poems, great conversation. Sports and poetry absolutely do not make strange bedfellows. They belong together.
Thank you for having us, and it was a really great time. Went by quick.
Yeah. Same here. It's a real
Yeah.
honor to meet with both of you. It was great to
Well-
be in the two hole. Yeah.
Well, I hope we meet in person. I hope the three of us meet in person sometime, but I look forward to the next time I see either one of you in person. So, may that day come soon.
All right, great.
Okay.
You'll be up in Boston in the fall?
Yeah, and New Hampshire too. And that whole area I'll be sort of around October, right around that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll check out your schedule. You got it probably posted somewhere online.
It's not yet, but hopefully I can get your email or something. We can stay in touch. So yeah, because I'm getting my signatures, man. And don't think you're ducking out of that.
I gotta get mine too.
I don't care about the pancakes, but I'm getting the signatures. So. Yeah.
Well, I assume you're going to be traveling with all of your books, Brian, when you're around Boston too, because I want to get in on that action, and it's a short hop for me to get up to Boston to see you read. So
yeah, I'll be at the Berkeley College of Music there.
All right.
That's what
really, oh great.
Yeah.
I just
Super.
parked my car there the other day to watch the Red Sox beat the Yankees Sunday night.
Let's not get into pain.
I didn't know it was under the shade.
We weren't going to get away without a dig.
It was a Father's Day gift for my family.
Oh yeah,
Probably.
yeah. It was a good series. They
Yeah, it was.
Boston brought it. Yeah, they were They also did the series before, so there's something happening with them right now this month. So
They just keep
Well.
teasing it on.
yeah,
Fair enough. That's how it works.
They used to say the Red Sox are like beach chairs. You fold them up in the fall.
Hey, I lived through more years
I know.
without a championship than you could ever imagine. And my dad was 4 years old when they won in 1918.
Yeah.
And he died in 1995. So he didn't get to see them win.
yeah. When I was talking about my grandfather, I forgot to complete the arc of that story. The reason I brought him up is because we're from California, and he was hoping to play for the San Francisco Seals, all that part. Then I think I went into World War II. But the problem is that the good part of that is why Yankees, right? You know, I grew up with his love of baseball, but it's because in the early 50s, around 52, 53, there was a telephone strike on the East Coast, and they brought a bunch of telephone workers out from the West Coast to man the tunnels and stuff. So he was brought to New York, and he was near the Brooklyn Bridge. They had like a tent city where they would live. He'd work in the tunnels, working on the telephone lines by day, and then at night he'd go to the ball games and see the Yankees of 1952, 50, right around there, you know. I mean, so
Wow.
how's he not going to fall in love, you know? So, yeah.
Well, also DiMaggio played at minor league ball for the Seals.
Yeah. Yeah. With Lefty
He
Grove.
was a
and-
San Francisco guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Great story.
Mm.
All right. Well, let me pull a plug on this, but we're going to have to talk further because we've got too many things to say.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a real
Farewell.
pleasure after meeting you guys. And Matt, I love your work, man. So, you know,
Brian.
yeah. And
Thank
Al,
you.
you
It's a
already know
love
that.
fest. Yeah. Okay. Till next time.